In a dusty corner of a forgotten warehouse, Emma Lane's eyes locked onto a rusted container, its faded exterior a stark contrast to the treasure she never expected to find. What started as a simple purchase turned into a life-altering discovery. Inside that container, among the forgotten remnants of the past, were relics worth millions. But what Emma didn't know was that this discovery would change her forever. Before we dive into Emma's extraordinary story, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you love stories of hidden treasures and unexpected journeys, hit that subscribe button because tomorrow's episode will have even more shocking twists. Let's get started. Emma Lane's hands were stained with grease as she wiped the sweat from her forehead, squinting at the crumbling rows of abandoned storage units in the scrapyard. It was her routine, her escape from the world that was too busy, too fast. Mechanics like her had a knack for finding hidden value in the discarded things that most people overlooked. But today, it was the back corner of the yard that caught her eye, a rusted metal container, half buried in the dirt, barely visible under the weight of years of neglect. For a moment, Emma stood there, her fingers twitching with the familiar urge to get to work. She wasn't exactly sure what drew her to it. Maybe it was the fact that the container was so out of place amidst the haphazard piles of wrecked cars and junked engines. Or maybe it was the way it seemed to call out to her, as if hiding something it wasn't quite ready to let go of. Either way, she couldn't resist. She headed toward it, boots crunching on the gravel with each step. The container was small, barely the size of a shipping crate, but the weight of it was enough to make her pause. Emma reached out, brushing away the thick layer of dust that clung to its surface. The metal groaned under her touch, and the rust seemed to flake away, revealing faded markings from a time long past. She bent down, running her fingers over the cool surface, trying to make out the faded numbers and letters. They didn't seem to belong to any shipping company she knew. Her heart skipped a beat. What was this doing here? It didn't belong in a scrapyard. It didn't belong anywhere. She couldn't help herself. The curiosity gnawed at her, pulling her closer, making it impossible to walk away. With a deep breath, Emma set her tools aside and started working on the container's lock. The rust had done its job well, but with a few strong twists, it gave way with a satisfying click. The air inside smelled stale, as if it had been sealed for decades. Emma slowly lifted the lid, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The faint, creaking sound of the container opening echoed around her, swallowed by the silence of the scrapyard. And then, Emma's eyes widened. At first, it didn't make sense. She blinked, trying to adjust to the dim light. Inside, the container was filled with clutter-old crates, faded boxes, and random junk. But in the very corner, tucked beneath a pile of dusty cloth, lay something that made her pulse quicken. It was a metal box, locked shut, with a heavy brass clasp. It seemed out of place, almost too neat in the middle of the disarray. Emma crouched down, her fingers hovering over it, unsure if she should even touch it. But something inside urged her on. She pried the box open with trembling hands. Inside was a collection of items that defied all logic. Gold coins, silver bars, and what appeared to be rare artifacts, ancient relics of a time long gone. She couldn't believe her eyes. This couldn't be real. This wasn't just junk. This was something worth millions. But as Emma gazed at the contents, she knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a lucky find. This was something far bigger, something that was going to change her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The sun was setting when Emma closed the container's lid, her heart still racing. She stood there for a moment, staring at the strange mix of treasure she'd uncovered, as if she might wake up from the dream. But no, it was real. Too real. The weight of the gold in her hand seemed to anchor her to the ground, and the hum of the scrapyard faded into the background as her mind raced. She needed to know more. The pieces of metal, the gold coins, the ancient artifacts, this wasn't just some random collection of junk. Emma knew it. She'd seen enough rare parts, old cars, and discarded machines to recognize when something valuable had been left behind. But what had this container been doing here, hidden away in the back of an old scrapyard? With a sense of urgency, she locked the container again and carefully slid it into the back of her truck. She didn't want anyone else getting curious before she had a chance to dig deeper. The sun had almost disappeared when she pulled into the driveway of her small workshop. There was an old building, a former mechanic's garage her father had once owned, now hers. There, amidst the sprawl of tools and car parts, Emma knew she could figure out what she'd just found. Inside the shop, the familiar smell of oil and rust felt comforting, a stark contrast to the uneasy thrill she felt now. Emma set the box down on her workbench and sat back in her old office chair. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows against the walls filled with parts and mechanical diagrams. She stared at the contents of the box again, wondering if there was something she'd missed. The coins were marked with symbols she'd never seen before, strange runes etched into their surface. The silver bars were heavier than they looked, too smooth and too cold to be ordinary metal. But it wasn't just the precious items that caught her attention, it was the documents she found underneath. A bundle of yellowed papers lay folded in the box. Emma carefully unfolded them, brushing the dust off, and began reading through the handwritten notes. They were old, the ink faded but still legible. The words weren't in English, but she could make out a few familiar phrases. Treasures from the past. The lost legacy. The more she read, the more it became clear. These items weren't just valuable. They were part of something much bigger. Emma's pulse quickened as the pieces started to fall into place. Whoever had left this container here had gone to great lengths to hide it. They had made sure the treasures were buried in layers of time, in places no one would think to look. But why? And who had been behind this mystery? Her mind raced. Her thoughts tangled. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was a hidden connection, something linking these artifacts together. But what? And why was she the one to find it? Determined to uncover the truth, Emma decided to trace the origins of the markings and the papers. She spent the next few hours scanning the documents, hoping to find a name, a clue, anything that would shed light on the container's history. It wasn't long before she found a name, one that seemed to stand out above the rest. Joseph Granger. The name was scrawled across several of the pages, always followed by an inscription in a language she couldn't understand. But there was one thing she could decipher. Granger had been a collector of rare artifacts and forgotten treasures. As Emma read the last of the documents, she realized something staggering. The container hadn't just been hidden, it had been stolen. This was no ordinary find. Whoever had taken these treasures had buried them deep, waiting for the right person to uncover them. But why? The answer seemed to be just out of reach. But Emma knew she couldn't stop now. Something told her this was only the beginning. Emma woke up early the next morning, the weight of the previous day's discovery still heavy on her mind. She had barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of the gold, the artifacts, and the cryptic name of Joseph Granger. She'd never imagined that a simple container in the back of a scrapyard could lead to something so monumental. But now, she couldn't stop thinking about what lay ahead. The first thing she did was open the box again. The light streaming through the small window of her workshop caught the gold coins, casting them in a warm, almost inviting glow. She took a closer look at them, flipping them over gently in her hands. Each one was meticulously crafted, adorned with intricate symbols and markings that hinted at a rich, mysterious history. But it was the silver bars that caught her attention next. Unlike anything she had seen before, they didn't look like modern bullion. They had a strange, almost otherworldly quality to them, their surfaces too smooth, their edges too perfect. Emma held one up to the light, inspecting it closely. The weight of it felt significant in her palm. Far more than just a simple, precious metal, this was something that had been crafted with purpose, a treasure that had been safeguarded for years. But Emma wasn't just fascinated by the gold and silver. Her attention shifted to something far more intriguing, a small, weathered leather pouch nestled at the bottom of the box. She had almost missed it earlier, hidden beneath the piles of gold coins. She hesitated for a moment before reaching for it, the anticipation building with each second. Inside the pouch was an assortment of small, carefully wrapped objects. When Emma unwrapped them, her breath caught in her throat. The first item was a small, intricately carved figurine. It looked like an ancient artifact, possibly from a lost civilization, its craftsmanship beyond anything Emma had ever seen. It was a small statue of a warrior, holding a sword, its details so fine that Emma could almost feel the weight of history in her hands. The second item was even more intriguing. A map, or rather, part of a map. It had been folded and creased over time, its edges worn, but it was still legible. A set of coordinates was scrawled across it in faded ink, along with more of those strange symbols she had seen on the coins. The map didn't just mark locations, it seemed to suggest a journey, a path, and perhaps a destination. As Emma stared at the map, a cold shiver ran down her spine. She didn't know what the map led to or where it came from, but something told her it was important. It wasn't just an old map, it was a clue to a secret, hidden away for generations. She quickly scanned the rest of the items in the pouch, but nothing else stood out as much as the map and the figurine. She placed them carefully on the workbench, her mind swirling with questions. Why was this stuff hidden away in a rusted container? Why had someone gone through so much effort to keep it secret? Her curiosity had shifted from the thrill of discovery to the need for answers. Whoever had buried these treasures had done so with intent, but Emma couldn't understand why. The more she thought about it, the more she felt like she was standing at the edge of a much larger mystery, one that had been buried for far too long. Suddenly, a thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. What if this wasn't just about the treasures? What if the items in this container weren't the end of the story? What if they were only the beginning? What if there was someone who had been watching, waiting for someone like her to find it all? She grabbed her phone and began researching Joseph Granger, trying to piece together what little information she could find about him. The name wasn't entirely unknown. There were rumors, whispers, of a wealthy collector who had mysteriously disappeared decades ago, leaving behind only a trail of questions. The deeper she dug, the more she uncovered. Granger wasn't just any collector. He was rumored to have spent years gathering rare artifacts from around the world, including pieces that were thought to have been lost to time. Some said he'd even been connected to infamous historical figures and events, but there was no trace of him after the mid-1980 seconds. No obituary, no final words, nothing. As Emma sat back in her chair, the weight of it all hit her. She wasn't just holding gold and silver, she was holding pieces of history, pieces of a story that had been buried for decades. But she wasn't the only one who would want them. Her heart pounded. She had stumbled into something far bigger than she could have imagined, and the more she uncovered, the more she realized that the answers she sought were not just hidden in the artifacts, but in the dangers that surrounded them. The days blurred together as Emma became consumed by her search for answers. Each new discovery led to more questions, and with every piece of history she uncovered, she felt like she was unraveling a mystery that had been hidden away for decades. The gold, the silver, the figurine, and the map. They weren't just random items. They were the key to something much larger, and Emma could feel herself on the verge of uncovering something monumental. The map had become her obsession. She couldn't stop looking at it, tracing the faded lines and deciphering the strange symbols. She'd spent hours on the phone with historians and experts in ancient languages, trying to decode the markings, but so far, no one had been able to make sense of them. Every lead seemed to hit a dead end, but she refused to give up. Emma spent the next few days cross-referencing the coordinates from the map with old maps of the region. She printed out old topographic sheets, scouring them with a magnifying glass, looking for any sign that the places marked on the map had been real. The more she looked, the more it became clear the locations were real, and they seemed to point to forgotten landmarks in the wild, uncharted parts of the country. Her heart raced as she compared the coordinates to a series of old auction listings and private sales. There, buried among the long-forgotten treasures, she found the name of Joseph Granger again. In one of the listings, an auction from the 1970s, a collection of artifacts from an undisclosed collection was described. The list of items seemed innocuous: old weapons, strange figurines, and rare coins. But it was the final line that caught her attention. Items procured from a private collection, believed to be tied to the lost legacy of the Empress's vault. The Empress's vault. The word seemed to echo in Emma's mind, sending a shiver down her spine. She'd never heard of it before, but it sounded too deliberate, too specific to be just a myth. The Empress's vault. A treasure trove hidden away. A legacy that had been lost for centuries. Emma dug deeper, reaching out to antique dealers, auction houses, and anyone who might have had knowledge of this vault. But the more she inquired, the more she realized that no one knew exactly where the vault was. The stories were fragmented, vague whispers of legends passed down through generations. The name Joseph Granger kept resurfacing, always associated with whispered secrets and missing pieces of history. She felt a sense of urgency now. The more she pieced together the fragmented story, the more she realized that the map, the artifacts, and the markings weren't just a coincidence. They were part of something far bigger. The Empress's vault was no myth. It was real, and it was out there, hidden in the world, and Joseph Granger had spent his life searching for it. But Emma knew one thing for sure. She wasn't the only one who had figured this out. A chill ran down her spine as she recalled the strange feeling she had gotten when she first opened the container. Something about it all felt off. She wasn't alone in this hunt. Whoever had hidden these treasures had made sure they were well protected. But Emma had already come this far, and she wasn't about to back down now. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the search wasn't just about the treasure. It was about uncovering a hidden truth, a story that had been buried for far too long, and she wasn't going to let anyone else find it first. Determined, Emma started to make plans. She would follow the map. She would track down the locations, no matter how far they led her. But there was one problem. She wasn't sure who else might be looking for it. She couldn't trust anyone, not when so much was at stake. The puzzle was coming together piece by piece, and Emma was getting closer to the answers. But the closer she got, the more dangerous things became. She wasn't just searching for treasure, she was searching for something far bigger, something that could change everything. Emma stood in front of the workbench, the clutter of the workshop surrounding her, and the remnants of the container's contents spread out before her. The gold coins, the figurine, the map, it all felt surreal. The weight of the discovery was starting to sink in, and it wasn't just the treasure she'd found that concerned her now. It was the nagging feeling that someone, or something, was tracking her every move. She had spent the last few days trying to piece together the significance of the Empress's vault and the role Joseph Granger played in its story. But the more she dug, the more elusive the answers became. Each time she thought she was getting closer, another dead end awaited her. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Emma didn't recognize the number, but something about it made her hesitate before answering. "Emma Lane?" a deep voice asked when she picked up. "This is she," Emma replied cautiously, her hand tightening around the phone. Something about the way the man said her name sent a chill through her. "You've been asking about Joseph Granger," the voice continued. "I think you've been digging where you shouldn't." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced, trying to place the voice, but it was too smooth, too guarded. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the growing sense of unease. "I think you've found more than you realize," the man said. "I can help you, but you have to stop looking for the vault." Emma's grip on the phone tightened as adrenaline surged through her. She wasn't going to back down, not now. "And if I don't?" she asked, her tone cold. There was a pause on the other end. "Then you'll learn that some things are better left buried." The line went dead before Emma could respond. She stared at the phone, her heart pounding in her chest. Who was that? She tried to shake off the sense of dread creeping up her spine, but it clung to her like a second skin. She had always trusted her instincts after all. It was her gut that had led her to the rusted container in the first place. And now her instincts were telling her she was getting closer to something much bigger than a simple treasure hunt. She thought about the figurine, the map, the strange symbols on the gold coins. There had to be a connection, something hidden beneath the surface. But what? As if on cue, her eyes fell on the final piece of the puzzle, the small, worn journal she had discovered in the bottom of the box. It was a small, leather-bound book, almost lost beneath the gold, with the faintest markings on its cover. She hadn't had a chance to look at it closely yet, but now it felt like the key. She grabbed it and flipped it open, scanning the pages quickly. The handwriting inside was sharp and precise, dated with entries from years ago. But what caught her attention wasn't the neatness of the writing. It was the name that appeared again and again. The Empress. The journal's contents were a combination of notes, sketches, and strange symbols. It wasn't just a collection of random thoughts, it was a record, a guide. The entries outlined a journey, one that had started decades ago, in search of something immense, something powerful. The Empress's vault. It wasn't just a treasure, it was a symbol, something tied to the very fabric of history itself. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. The more she read, the more her thoughts were confirmed. Joseph Granger wasn't just a collector, he had been on a mission. The vault wasn't just a storage space for riches, it was something far more significant. But what? And why had Granger gone to such lengths to hide it? As Emma read on, she stumbled upon a map that matched the one she had found. It was a more detailed version, with annotations about specific locations, some of which seemed to be near places she had already visited. The names were different, but the markings were unmistakable. The vault was real, and Emma was on the right track, but someone else was watching her. She could feel it. The thought was almost too much to bear. Was she being followed? Or had someone planted a trap for her? The mystery was deepening, and every time Emma thought she understood, the story shifted just a little bit more. Closing the journal, she made a decision. She wasn't going to stop. The vault was out there, and she was going to find it before someone else did. The only question now was who to trust, and whether she could stay ahead of the game. Emma's mind raced as she packed her bag, gathering everything she needed for the next step in her journey. The journal, the map, and the gold coins were now in her possession, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the deeper she went, the more danger she was putting herself in. The mysterious call had rattled her. Someone knew what she was doing. Someone who had been watching her every move. She paused for a moment, her hand resting on the door handle. Could she trust anyone? The walls of her small workshop seemed to close in on her as her thoughts swirled, and the feeling of being followed intensified. She had never felt this vulnerable before. Not even when she first started out as a mechanic, scraping by on the edges of a world that barely saw her. But this was different. She wasn't just fixing things anymore. She was digging into something far more dangerous. The sound of her phone buzzing on the counter broke her train of thought. She grabbed it quickly, expecting another anonymous number. But this time, it was a name she recognized: Sam McAllister, the local antique dealer she'd worked with in the past. "Emma, you okay?" Sam's voice crackled through the phone. A tone of concern mixed with something else. Something she couldn't quite place. "I heard you've been asking around about Joseph Granger." Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. "I'm fine. Just digging into some old stuff. Nothing major." She kept her voice casual, but the unease in her chest was unmistakable. "You don't fool me," Sam replied, his voice dropping lower. "Listen, I know what you found, and I think you need to be careful." Emma felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there are people who would do anything to get their hands on what you've found. Trust me, you don't want to mess with the Granger legacy." Sam's warning echoed in her ears. "These things, they're not just artifacts. They're part of a bigger picture, one that's been hidden for a reason. Some of these people, they don't play by the rules." The blood in Emma's veins seemed to freeze. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't have all the answers," Sam continued. "But I know enough. Granger wasn't just a collector. He was a part of something far bigger, a network of people who have been hiding these treasures for generations. It's not just about wealth. It's about power, control. These artifacts, they matter. He paused before adding, and there are people who will stop at nothing to get them. Emma felt the weight of his words sink in. This wasn't just a treasure hunt anymore. This was a war. Are you saying I'm in danger? She asked, her voice shaking with the gravity of the situation. I'm saying you don't know who you're dealing with, Sam replied. There's a group, a faction, really, that's been after these pieces for years. They've got resources, connections, and they won't hesitate to do whatever it takes to get them. And now, you've walked right into their path. Emma took a deep breath, her hands trembling. What should I do? Get out, Sam said, the urgency in his voice unmistakable. This is bigger than you think. You need to walk away before it's too late. Emma stood still, staring at the workbench, the gold coins glittering in the soft light. The map sat before her, its coordinates calling to her. She wasn't going to turn back. I can't do that, Sam, she said softly. I have to know the truth, whatever it takes. There was silence on the other end of the phone. When Sam spoke again, his voice was laced with hesitation. Just be careful. There's more at play here than you realize. And once you're in, there's no getting out. With that, the line went dead. Emma stared at the phone for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't ignore what Sam had said. She couldn't pretend that there wasn't a looming threat now, following her every step. But there was something else too, something burning inside her. She couldn't walk away from this. The vault was too important. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. And no matter how dangerous it became, she had to see it through. She grabbed her bag and swung the door open, stepping into the daylight. The world felt heavier now, as though the stakes had suddenly multiplied. But Emma wasn't backing down. She had a mission, and no matter who or what was after her, she was going to finish what she had started. The air in the car felt thick. As Emma drove down the empty highway, the weight of Sam's warning still pressing on her chest. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should have, every rustle of wind sending a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She could feel the danger creeping closer, like a storm on the horizon, but there was no turning back now. The coordinates on the map burned in her mind, and she couldn't ignore them. She had to see it through. As she approached the first marked location on the map, Emma slowed, taking in the sight of the area, an abandoned mansion tucked deep in the woods, its decaying frame half hidden by overgrown vines. It seemed like a place that time had forgotten, but Emma had the sinking feeling that it wasn't just the mansion that had been overlooked. It was everything inside of it. She parked her truck near the gates and stepped out, the air cool against her skin as she surveyed the property. The mansion looked as though it had been abandoned for years, its windows shattered, and the grounds overtaken by wild brush. The further she walked, the more she felt like she was trespassing in a forgotten world, one that was meant to stay hidden. As she reached the front steps, Emma noticed something she hadn't seen before, a faint symbol carved into the stone next to the door. It was the same symbol that had appeared on the coins, those strange runes. Her heart quickened. Emma stepped forward cautiously, her fingers tracing the symbol, and then something caught her eye. On the stone under her hand, there was a faint message, scratched out by someone in a hurry. The words were barely legible, as if someone had tried to hide them, but the meaning was unmistakable. The truth is buried beneath the floorboards. Emma's pulse raced. She crouched down, scanning the ground, her mind whirling, beneath the floorboards. The hidden message had to be a clue, and Emma wasn't about to leave without finding out what it meant. She carefully examined the area around her, taking note of every crevice and crack in the crumbling foundation. The house seemed to exhale in the wind, creaking and groaning as though it was alive, whispering its secrets. Finally, she found it. Near the center of the room, a wooden panel stood slightly askew, its edges worn by time. It was tucked under a faded rug, almost as though it had been deliberately hidden. With a deep breath, Emma pried it loose, the wood groaning in protest. Underneath, There was a narrow gap leading to a space beneath the floor, dark, musty, and cold. She lowered herself into the space, using her phone's flashlight to guide her way. The air down here smelled old, heavy with dust and neglect. But it wasn't just the stale air that caught her attention. As her light flickered across the floor, she spotted something buried beneath a pile of old papers and rotting wood. A box, a small wooden box, old and carved with intricate symbols, just like the one she had seen before. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached for it, her hands shaking as she pulled it out. The box was heavier than it looked, and when she opened it, she saw what lay inside: a bundle of faded letters, sealed with wax, and a collection of rare antique keys. Emma's fingers trembled as she picked up the first letter, breaking the seal carefully. The handwriting inside was elegant, flowing each word a trace of history. "To whoever finds this," the letter began, "you are about to uncover the secrets that have been hidden for centuries. Know this: the Empress's vault is not merely a treasure trove. It is a power that can change the course of history. Protect it, guard it, and use it wisely." The rest of the letter was filled with cryptic notes, references to locations she didn't recognize, and mentions of people, some of whom she had read about in the journal she'd found. But the most important part was the last line. "The keys to the vault are hidden in plain sight. Use the keys, but beware. Some doors should never be opened." Emma's hands froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The keys to the vault. She looked at the antique keys lying in the box, each one different, each one seeming to hum with an ancient energy. Her mind raced. The vault wasn't just a place, it was a legacy, a power that had been kept secret for centuries. And now, she had the keys. But with those keys came responsibility, a warning. And Emma wasn't sure she was ready for what lay ahead. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise, a rustling sound from above. She froze, her senses sharpening. Had someone followed her? Or had she stumbled into something far darker than she realized? Emma grabbed the box, her heart pounding. She had to leave. Fast. Emma's heart raced as she scrambled out from beneath the mansion's floorboards, clutching the box in her hands. The ancient keys rattled inside, a sound that echoed in the silence of the crumbling house. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something, was watching her. The air was thick with tension, the shadows seeming to shift and stretch around her. She carefully replaced the floorboard, making sure it looked undisturbed, before quickly climbing back into the main room. Her mind raced as she scanned her surroundings. She wasn't sure what she had stumbled upon, but she knew one thing for certain: there was no turning back now. The Empress's vault, the keys, the mysterious warnings, they were all pieces of a puzzle she needed to solve. Just as she was about to head for the door, a voice broke the silence, sending a chill down her spine. "I knew you'd find it eventually." Emma froze. The voice was familiar, but it didn't belong here. She slowly turned, her eyes narrowing as she saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was Sam McAllister, the same man who had warned her just days ago to stay away. The same man who had seemed so concerned about her safety. But now, he was standing there with a cold, calculating smile on his face. "You," Emma spat, her breath quickening. "What are you doing here?" Sam stepped forward, his hands casually in his pockets. "I've been following your progress, Emma, keeping tabs, making sure you didn't get yourself into something too deep." "What do you mean, keeping tabs?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with anger and disbelief. "You were the one who warned me about this. Now you're here?" Sam's smile grew wider. "You didn't think I was just some friendly antique dealer, did you? I told you this wasn't just about treasure. I told you there were people after it." He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Turns out, I'm one of them." Emma's stomach dropped. One of them? The words hung in the air like a death sentence. All this time, she had trusted him, let him into her world, thinking he was just another person trying to help. But now it was clear. Sam had been playing a game of his own. "You've been using me," Emma said, her voice shaking with the realization. You knew about the vault all along. You wanted me to find it for you." Sam shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Maybe. Maybe not. But you've got the keys now, don't you? That's what I've been after." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver key one that matched the others in the box. "This is just the beginning, Emma. With the right keys, we can unlock more than just treasure. We can unlock power." Emma took a step back, her heart pounding. The weight of the box in her hands suddenly felt unbearable. She had been so close to the truth, but now she realized she had been duped. Sam wasn't the ally she thought he was. He was a part of the dark undercurrent she had been swimming against from the very start. "I'm not helping you," Emma said, her voice low but firm. She clenched her fists, the ancient keys pressing into her palm. "You're not getting your hands on this." Sam's smile faltered, just for a moment, before it returned with a cold edge. "You don't have a choice, Emma. You're already in this. You can't just walk away. And if you think you can hide the vault's secrets from me, you're wrong. I'll find you, no matter where you go." Emma turned and ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she sprinted out the door and into the woods. The crunch of dry leaves beneath her boots was the only sound as she pushed herself harder, faster, feeling the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders. Trusting the wrong people, it was a mistake she couldn't undo. Sam's betrayal was like a jagged stone lodged in her chest, a painful reminder that she couldn't afford to trust anyone. Not now. Not when everything she had worked for was at risk. She didn't stop running until the mansion was far behind her, until the tree line swallowed it up, leaving only the darkening sky above and the pounding of her heart in her ears. But even as she tried to steady her breathing, a feeling of dread settled deep within her. Sam would be back, and when he returned, he wouldn't be alone. Whoever else was after the vault's secrets would stop at nothing to find it. Emma knew the truth now. She was no longer just hunting treasure, she was running a race against people who would kill to get their hands on the vault's power. She had to stay one step ahead, or she wouldn't make it out alive. The air was thick with the weight of Emma's thoughts as she made her way back to her truck. She hadn't even looked back at the mansion, and she wasn't sure she ever would. What she had just uncovered was dangerous, and she felt it in her bones. The walls were closing in, and Sam's betrayal had turned the game into something deadly. The ancient keys in her hand seemed to burn, with a purpose she couldn't fully understand. But one thing was clear. She had only scratched the surface. The map, the journal, the keys, everything had led her to this moment. Each puzzle piece fit together, but there was still something missing. One last piece that would tie it all together, something she hadn't yet discovered. And as the night settled in, Emma knew she had to find it. The final location, the vault. She spent the next few hours in her truck, the map spread across her lap, and the pieces of the journal laid out in front of her. The symbols, the markings, they all pointed toward one place, a location that had remained hidden from the world for centuries. But now, with everything falling into place, she understood. It's not just a place, it's a test. Her fingers traced the final coordinates, and a name appeared in her mind. The Hollow Grove. She had read about it once, in a faint reference buried deep in the journal. It was an ancient grove of trees, a location that had been lost to time, thought to be a myth. But now she knew it was real, the last resting place of the vault. Emma's heart raced as she started the engine, her hands gripping the wheel. The Hollow Grove was located deep in the woods, far off any main road. It would be hard to find, almost impossible for anyone who wasn't already looking for it. But Emma wasn't just anyone. She had the keys, and now she had the knowledge. The drive felt like a blur. The trees, the endless roads, the feeling of being hunted, it all melted into the background as she focused solely on the road ahead. Each mile felt heavier than the last, the tension in the air growing thicker, as though the very earth was holding its breath. She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that someone, maybe even more than one person, was following her. But she refused to look over her shoulder. She was done running. She arrived at the edge of the woods, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The last rays of light barely pierced the thick canopy of trees, casting long shadows on the path ahead. Emma could feel the weight of history pressing down on her as she stepped out of the truck, the sound of her boots crunching on the forest floor, the only noise breaking the stillness. Her instincts kicked in as she moved deeper into the woods. The Hollow Grove wasn't a myth. It was real. And it was waiting for her. An hour into the forest, Emma came across a clearing, the trees towering around her, their roots twisting in strange, almost unnatural patterns. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient oak, its gnarled branches stretching high into the sky. Beneath it, half buried in the earth, was a stone slab. Her breath caught as she approached it. The markings on the stone matched the symbols on the coins, the keys, the map. Everything she had discovered so far had led her here. This was it, the final piece. Emma knelt beside the stone, pulling the keys from her pocket. The cold metal felt strangely warm in her hands, as though it had been waiting for this moment. She inserted the first key into a hidden slot in the stone, twisting it with a soft click. The earth beneath her feet trembled, and the slab began to move, slowly, sliding aside to reveal a dark opening. Inside, the vault waited, but as Emma stepped forward, a cold voice shattered the silence. "You shouldn't have come." Emma spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Sam McAllister stood at the edge of the clearing, flanked by two men she didn't recognize, tall, imposing figures dressed in black. Sam's expression was cold, calculating. "You really thought you could get away with it, didn't you?" Emma stood her ground, the final key still clutched in her hand. "I'm not letting you have it. This vault, this power, doesn't belong to people like you," Sam smirked. "You've misunderstood everything, Emma. This vault isn't just about wealth, it's about control. And it's mine. You never stood a chance." The two men took a step forward, but Emma was ready. She knew the stakes now. She had to protect the vault, protect what she had uncovered. But as Sam took another step closer, something in Emma shifted. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She wasn't just looking for a treasure. She was looking for justice. With the last key in her hand, she stepped into the vault, the darkness swallowing her whole. And as the entrance to the vault closed behind her, she knew that the final piece of the puzzle had been unlocked. Now, it was time to face whatever lay within. The darkness in the vault was almost suffocating, but Emma's eyes adjusted quickly to the dim glow from the walls. They weren't solid stone, like she had expected. Instead, the vault was lined with intricate carvings, glowing faintly in the low light. The ancient keys in her hand seemed to hum with an energy she hadn't felt before. It was like they were alive, resonating with something deep within the earth. She moved carefully, step by step, her mind focused on the task at hand. The voices of Sam and his men faded away outside, but she could still feel their presence lurking in the back of her mind. They were relentless, dangerous, but they weren't the real threat. The vault was the true test, and Emma knew it. The floor beneath her feet was cold, but the further she walked, the more she could feel the power that pulsed in the air. At the far end of the vault, a pedestal rose from the ground, upon which rested a heavy, ancient chest. Its surface was covered in runes and symbols, symbols she had seen before. This was it, the heart of the vault. She knew instinctively that the chest contained whatever had been lost for so long. Emma approached it slowly, her breath steady. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her, the weight of everything she had fought for. Her hands trembled as she reached for the chest, but before she could open it, a voice cut through the stillness. "It's over, Emma." She spun around, her heart hammering. Sam and his men had found their way into the vault. They were standing at the entrance, blocking her only exit. The look in Sam's eyes was one of cold victory, but there was something else too, a flicker of uncertainty, as though he wasn't sure what would happen next. "You're too late," Emma said, her voice steady, though her pulse raced. "You don't understand. This isn't about treasure or control. It's about something more, something that can change everything." Sam chuckled, his hand resting on the handle of a gun at his side. "You still don't get it, do you? This vault was never about power. It was about legacy. And you've been too naive to see it. Emma took a step back, her eyes not leaving Sam for a second. She wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. The vault wasn't just an object, a place. It was a lesson. A message from the past, waiting for someone who could see beyond the surface. The final key, she could feel it in her pocket. The last piece she had been carrying all this time. Without thinking, she pulled it out and stepped toward the chest. The key fit perfectly into the lock, and with a soft click, the chest opened. Inside, there was no gold, no silver, no jewels. There was only a collection of papers, old, fragile documents that seemed to glow with an almost ethereal light. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she realized what this was. The truth. The vault wasn't about wealth. It was about legacy, just like Sam had said. But not in the way he thought. These documents were a record of something long forgotten. The story of an empire, of secrets that had been hidden for centuries. The Empress's vault wasn't a treasure trove, it was a message. A blueprint for a new future. A guide to restoring balance in a world that had lost its way. Emma looked at Sam, her gaze unwavering. This isn't yours to take. It's not about power. It's about change. Sam stepped forward, his eyes locked on the chest, but for the first time he hesitated. The two men behind him looked unsure, glancing at each other as if they were waiting for some kind of order. The moment stretched, thick with tension, but Emma didn't flinch. Sam reached out, but before he could touch the documents, Emma placed her hand firmly on top of them. The symbols on the chest seemed to pulse beneath her fingers, as though they were acknowledging her claim. "This isn't for you," she said again, her voice stronger now. "It's for everyone. It's about rebuilding, restoring what was lost. You can't just take it." For a moment, no one moved. Then, Sam's hand slowly fell away, his expression a mix of disbelief and something deeper, regret, maybe. He looked at Emma one last time, as though weighing his options. And then, with a sharp exhale, he nodded to the men beside him. "You think you can save the world?" Sam sneered, though there was no conviction in his voice anymore. "Good luck with that." With a final glance at the vault, Sam turned and walked toward the exit, his men following closely behind. Emma didn't take her eyes off them until the vault door finally closed behind them, leaving her alone in the silence. She stood still for a moment, the weight of the chest's contents pressing down on her. The truth was no longer buried. The future was now in her hands. With the vault behind her, Emma took a deep breath, feeling the world shift beneath her feet. The chest was more than just a collection of ancient papers. It was a map, a guide to a new future, a future that she was ready to help build. As she exited the vault, stepping into the cool night air, Emma realized that her journey was just beginning. She wasn't just a mechanic anymore. She was a keeper of history, a protector of a legacy that could change everything. The world outside was still uncertain, but for the first time, Emma felt ready for what lay ahead. She wasn't just fixing what was broken. She was rebuilding. And this time, it was for everyone.